Okay, it says state the domain and range of each of the following. So in part A, we have f at x is equal to 2x minus 3. This represents a line that looks something like this with arrows at the ends. So because we have arrows at the ends, that means this line is going to continue growing the direction of the arrows. There won't be any restrictions on the domain and range when we scan it right, left, up, and down. So we can write that the domain is x belongs to the real number set, and the range will be y belongs to the real number set. Okay, next part B, we have g at x is equal to negative 3x plus 1 squared plus 6. This is a quadratic relation in vertex form that represents a parabola, and this particular parabola is going to open down because of this negative. Now parabolas get wider and wider, so there's no restriction on the domain when we scan it right and left. So we can state that the domain is x belongs to the real number set. There will be restrictions on the range, however, because although the parabola goes downwards, it stops right here when we're scanning upwards. So it stops at the vertex here. So since we are interested in the range, we need to know what the y-coordinate of the vertex is. And if we look at the vertex form here, the y-coordinate of the vertex would be the value of k that's added at the end. So in this case, it's going to be 6. So the highest y value of 6, and the rest of the y-coordinates will be less than 6. So we're going to write y belongs to the real number set such that y is less than or equal to 6, and that would be our range. C, we have x plus 1 squared plus y plus 7 squared is equal to 16. This is the equation of a circle whose center is not at the origin. The center of the circle will be at coordinates -1, -7, since the center are the values that are being subtracted from x and y. So we're subtracting -1 from x. That's the reason we see +1, and we're subtracting -7 from y, and that's why we see +7. Now the radius is going to be 4 because the 16 represents the radius squared. So if you imagine here we have an x-axis here at -1, and we're interested in finding these 2 points here because that's where our circle stops when we scan right and left. Okay, so to find this point, we start at the x-coordinate of the center of the circle, and we go the amount of the radius to the right. And to find this point, we start at the center of the circle, and we go the amount of radius to the left. So the domain can be written as x belongs to the real number set such that if we're at -1 here, and we go 4 to the left, we end up at -5. So -5 would be the lowest x-coordinate on the circle. And then if we're at -1 and we go 4 to the right, we end up at 3. So 3 would be the highest x-coordinate on the circle. And remember, we did something like this in the review when we found the 4 points, the rightmost, leftmost, topmost, and bottommost points. Okay, now for the range, we're starting at a y-coordinate of -7 here. And then to find the lowest y-coordinate, we're going to have to go down the amount of the radius. So if we're at -7 and we go down 4, we end up at -11. And then to find the highest y-coordinate, we're at -7 here at the center of the circle, and we go up the amount of the radius to bring us to -3. So this would be the domain, and this would be the range for this particular equation of a circle. And now in part D, we have h at x is equal to the square root of 2 minus x. This is a square root function, but it's not one that you've graphed just yet. So we're going to use some reasoning to figure out the domain and the range. Now we know that we can take the square root of a negative value. So this here that is circled has to be at the very minimum 0, okay? And then the rest of the values can be higher. So for this to be 0, if I put 2 equal x is equal to 0, makes x equal to 2. So when x is 2, y will end up being 0. Okay, so 2 minus 2 is 0, square root of 0 is 0. Okay, so we can state that for the domain, x belongs to the real number set. We know that the highest x-coordinate that we can have is 2. The rest of the x-coordinates have to be less than 2 in order for this number to stay positive. Anything greater than 2 would make this part under the square root sign negative, and we can't have that. So that's why the domain will be x has to be less than or equal to 2. Now for the range, when x is equal to 2, we know that y will equal to 0. And if we have anything less than 2 for x, the y values will be greater than 0. Okay, so for example, if x is going to be 1, 2 minus 1 is 1, and the square root of 1 is 1, and that's greater than 0. So that's how we can determine the domain and range by using some logical reasoning.